But if it's someone that's like here, it'd be like Kanye before he went crazy, is who I'd want to meet because I think he's like a really good creative. But so like maybe this is what like 2014 Kanye.
Well, you missed the old Kanye.
Yeah, I'm still Kanye. Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to episode 4 of Not a Minimum Viable podcast. My name is Manit and I'm joined here by my co-host Rudy, and we're here to bring you conversations with the builders, founders and entrepreneurs who are shipping way more than just MVPs in Toronto's tech ecosystem. Each episode we dive deep into their journeys from those early MVPs to the full-scale solutions they're building now. Today, we're joined by Kelindi, a full-stack engineer working in Web3. He thrives on building cutting-edge software with a hands-on approach, prioritizing creativity over conventional tools. Known for his creative spark, Kelindi engages in the Toronto tech community by blending technical prowess with a playful, artistic edge. So welcome, Kelindi. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, what a nice intro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. And like you and I have met before, but
Yeah.
like briefly, and I largely just know you through Rudy. So I'm curious, how did you guys first meet?
Oh, I met you at the gym, and
Yeah.
funnily enough, I know Rudy because there was a fitness challenge that we had on Twitter. It was what, 90 days? How many days?
90, I think.
90 days fitness challenge. We had like two different teams, and the competition was like who works out the most amount of time.
Okay.
So Rudy was on the team of people who were like really like into fitness and athletic, and I was on the team of people who were like not that. And so that's how I met Rudy. But no, I met you in person at the Builder Sunday.
I think it was way before that. The first time we met, you remember Youthful Vengeance? It was that one time when we were at Sid's Cafe.
Oh yeah, but I didn't make the connection. You're the same Rudy.
Yeah, so when
Yeah.
I initially met you at Builder Sunday, I had remembered you, like at least your name or Twitter profile
Yeah.
or whatever, from that Youthful Vengeance meetup
Yeah.
ages ago. And I was like, oh, it's that same guy. So I pulled up and
Yeah.
said hi, and we skated together the same day at
Oh
Builder
yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah.
And that's how it kicked off.
Yeah. But yeah, no, because you were standing on like the workout chart. Like you were like the top. Yeah, you won the entire
Big
thing.
dog.
Even though your team lost, you won the most because you were like the most consistent.
Yeah.
Wait, your
and
team
stuff.
lost? I thought you were on the team with like the most fitness people.
Yeah, but they were sane people. We were not sane.
They gamed the system. So what they did is they did activities that as a group would get them more points. So something like basketball, right? Like realistically, an individual person isn't playing basketball continuously for 3 hours.
Okay. I don't want to say we gamed the system. I would just say
Let's-
we
let's
just
be real.
we just crammed all the fitness in like a shorter amount of time.
Because it was measuring by calorific burn.
No, it's just time spent.
Time spent.
Oh,
So
okay.
there were like there's a week where all we did was work out the entire day, and that would be like us like biking everywhere, walking, skating, playing basketball. Me and Tommy biked from like downtown to like King West, all the way to Mississauga, to like Vin's house.
Which is what me and Mithil did like the week before.
Yeah, but you guys didn't like really make it that public. But also you guys did from Etobicoke. That doesn't really count. Or you guys did
No.
to Etobicoke, right?
Where's the Tobico? So
I don't know. Where did you? I didn't know you guys biked. I knew
we
like
used the city bike. So like we went up till the last like city bike stop.
Yeah,
and
no,
we had
no,
somebody
we
come
went
pick
we
us
went
up.
all the way. We racked up those hours, but
Oh, I see.
but it
Wow.
wasn't healthy what we did because I remember everyone felt really bad after.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't, but it was a good experience. It was good. Like we really got into basketball. It's really
Okay.
fun. Yeah.
Wait, so do you watch basketball now or?
No.
Okay.
We stopped playing basketball,
That
but
was just
I
the
like to
one
get back
week.
into it in the summer.
Okay.
Like it just it got colder, so it didn't really make a lot of sense because we got into it right before the weather started getting cold. So right as like the fitness challenge ended, then like we used to play at like McCormick Park, and then
Oh.
the challenge ended, like it started getting really cold,
Yeah.
and
There's a lot of indoor gyms as well, though. I think
It's a lot
yeah.
more expensive than using like something that's just out in the open.
Yeah. No, that's of course.
yeah. Yeah, that's how I met Rudy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see Rudy everywhere now. He's always at all the events.
This is true. I've noticed this as well. Like we talked about this a bit last time as well. That whenever you go to Shopify Builder Sundays, people are like walking up to your table to be like, "Oh my God, Rudy, you were building this the other day. Like I saw this, dude. That's so sick." And I'm like, "Damn, dude, people know you here."
Yeah, I think in my opinion, Rudy is one of the people that like ships things consistently.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you and Flora and like I think yeah, that's it. At the top of my head, there might be other people, but I always see you two shipping a lot, like projects. Yeah, so I think that's why you're always on the timeline, or like people are like aware.
Oh yeah, dude. Honestly, like, cause I was on vacation last week, like taking time off of X and Twitter such a blessing. Like I understand what people mean now by just like when they choose to actively not be on that platform, because it's so refreshing not having to deal with all that stuff.
Yeah, so I spent a month this month kind of doing that. I was like less active on Twitter. Stopped doing my side projects. I just did work and then like did other stuff. And I was hanging out with like my friends that like they don't know who Claude is. And so that was like really refreshing for me, just like disconnecting from everything.
Just a side note, kind of cool how you mentioned who Claude is instead of what Claude is.
Exactly.
I was gonna ask about that, but then you said who, so I
No, so
glazed
Claude's
past.
like if you know how to use AI, you're probably using Claude instead of ChatGPT.
Yeah,
It's you know Claude, right?
yeah, because
Yeah.
of him. He was
Yeah.
like, "Don't trust ChatGPT." Like, use
Yeah.
Claude.
Yeah, but like yeah, so all my friends, other friends who are outside of like Toronto Tech Twitter use like ChatGPT if they have to use AI. So no one's using like really fancy prompts or anything, just like ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of refreshing because like most of my conversations with like tech Twitter people, it's like, oh, you hear this new AI thing that happened, or it's just
Yeah.
you know, so it's like it's good to take a break sometimes. I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
And I think Claude is Anthropic, right? So I was seeing their YouTube channel also has good like a doc series that they do where people are like presenting. It's like TEDx but for Anthropic specifically. I think it's called AI Engineer or something. Those are also pretty good. It's basically people explaining their research. Like,
Yeah, I think Anthropic does that quite a lot. They put out like blog posts as well about all the cool
Yeah.
stuff that they're doing. I personally have not read them. I should, as somebody in this field, but I do know that they're like of very high quality.
But I think that's largely because there's kind of a spectrum within the tech community as well, right? People who just like implementing as fast as they can versus people who are like taking years or months to just deep dive into the theoretical side of things.
Right, like a quantity versus quality type of thing.
I guess in some ways, but like it's also
like
about what
if you're
value.
working on foundational models, then you probably have to like look at the research and everything. But if you're
Mhm.
making like apps on top of AI, all you have to read is the API docs, and you're pretty much set. Like I think we're at a point where most of it's pretty abstracted away. So all AI engineers are just people who call APIs and SDKs. They're not actual. I mean, like when I graduated at university, like an AI engineer, I feel like meant you had to know like statistics, they're really good, you know, linear algebra. Now you just need to know like I feel like you go to boot camp and be an AI engineer. So, but if you're on the more math side of it or you care about how the models work, then yeah, like reading the papers and stuff makes sense.
So you also graduated from the University of Toronto, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
2022. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Oh,
So
wow. So your like second last year was COVID.
the middle of my second year was COVID.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I don't know, when I left university, so I studied cognitive science and stats, and when I left university, I was just under the impression that like we AGI was really far away because in my head I was like, oh, all this ML, machine learning, everything, just like fancy linear regression. Like if you kind of dumb it down, or just like it's just all math, right? It's just all being represented by math. So I was like, there's no way like math is like thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, we were like really far off. But then like within a year of me graduating, GPT came out, and still I was like, oh, it's just like probability, right? It's just kind of guessing the next token, which is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's getting to a point now where it's kind of like uncanny, even though like I have to remind myself like, oh, this is just math at the end of the day. It's not anything like not thinking or anything, but it is kind of weird like where we are now. Yeah. I know like it's happened over a short period of time too.
I think the scale is kind of jarring because even when I'm like in class and I'm not a CS student, but if I'm like taking a class in an adjacent field like with natural language processing and I'm working on stuff which is like, you know, word to vex stuff and it's like basics and it's like a small data set and then the prof's just kind of explaining how this compares to ChatGPT and the scale at which those models are being trained and the fact that UofT's terminal for Jupyter can't run like even 1/20th of any of those
Well,
models.
that's because they're like it's like what like you got 2 gigs of RAM on
Yeah.
the Jupyter Notebook. I like Google Collab. I ended up using that.
Yeah.
While I was at university. I think there's like a $20 or like $10 membership where you get like really good compute on there.
Mhm.
So you can get like a Jupyter Notebook on steroids. I started doing all my assignments there because the UofT, at least when I was a student, it was like unreliable. I remember the UofT Jupyter Notebook server went down,
Yeah.
and a prof is like, "Oh, that sucks. You guys should not have like waited till the last minute." I was like, "What?" So I just started doing Google Collab.
That is rough. It happened to me as well on the last day of an assignment where my Jupyter Hub crashed because I ran a model that was too big and it went past the memory space and my kernel died. and it just would not restart. Like every time I tried to log in, it'd say forbidden. Like I personally was blocked from accessing Jupyter Hub, and I like emailed my prof, and he was like, just go into like incognito mode and run it again, and it worked. And I was like, okay, thanks for just being prompt about it. But
Yeah. So do you like Rudy? Have you taken like the UofT ML classes or?
I have, but I had the time I took those classes, I had like a MacBook Pro.
Okay.
So any model, any like data set, I was just able to run on my computer without any issues.
Okay. Are they? What are they teaching you guys? Like, did you take it after GPT came out?
I did. So it's still like the basic foundational stuff. They don't have like the most up to date information about like large language models or anything like that, but they have the foundations leading up to it. So they have the Intro to AI course that I took, as well as like the deep learning and neural networks course.
Yeah.
They taught us about LSTMs, recurrent neural networks, even transformers a little bit, but like that's about the extent of it, right? Like there's so much more that.
Do you still have to like derive some of the stuff from scratch?
Yeah, but only like the basic stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because like we'd spend the first part of an assignment normally just doing the math for whatever, and then the second part would be like, you did all that, you coded all that. Nah, you can just import it from like scikit-learn, and then it's there.
Yeah. There
which
was a lot
which
of
is like
that.
really frustrating for me because it's like it's there, it's already abstracted. Like why am I? Like I was like in industry, I don't think they're. I think in industry they're just importing from scikit-learn.
Yeah, I feel like there's a huge disconnect between how stuff is being taught in those lectures and how like actual researchers are going about doing things. Like yes, it's important for you to understand all these like foundational stuff, but at the same time, I believe it should be taught in a way where you are able to use it to build on top of like other stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like that was my main frustration. It was just like, oh, it's all this foundational stuff, but we're not doing like the fun stuff after. It's just all this stuff, and then at the end you can just import it from a library. That's pretty
right.
standard. Yeah, I think that's like why like I really wanted to go into AI, but I thought like, oh, it's like this probably in industry, so I didn't really end up like pursuing it like immediately after university. Yeah.
But there's surely like some value to that as well, right? Because I notice in like at least consulting and fields like that, going to business school where they prioritize theoretical knowledge over just pure application, there's a slight disconnect that when you're doing a client facing role and you're talking to clients who don't care so much about the theory, your instant interaction with them is about what's on the surface level. It's like, what does it mean to me? I don't care how all of this is functioning, like under the hood, and what the technicalities here are. What does it translate to me on a day to day? But then, if I don't know how it works under the hood, I personally can't explain it to myself. So I feel like there's a disconnect there. Like, oh, I know how to do this. I can get you the answer, but I don't know what the workings are.
Yeah, I think it like depends, at least for like software, right? It's like there's like high level software engineering and like really low level, right? And so I feel like for most people, like you don't really need to know like stuff like binary, like converting stuff from binary format to like regular format. Like you don't need to know that unless you're doing like super low level stuff, which some people are. But the vast majority of people, they aren't really doing that. They're like using JavaScript, right? So you don't really have to deal with binary bits there. And so I think the same thing might be like happening with AI, where most people don't really need to know how it's working. They just have to deal with the abstractions, which is like I think that's where we are now. Because even like with code, with like AI code gen, they're like it's abstracted even more, where people don't even know what the code does, right? Forget like how like machine level stuff works.
Right, vibe coding.
Yeah, vibe coding. Yeah.
What do you think of that like whole quote unquote movement though? Do you think that does it hold water for you?
Oh,
Or,
vibe coding?
Yeah, or do you still think there's like a lot more value to know what your code is doing?
I think it's been really fun for me to see like my non-technical friends make things. And it's been really interesting to observe how they do vibe coding, right? I think it's been really like it's good to make like a quick like MVP, I think. So you can like test out an idea before you like invest time into it. But I don't think it's really good at making stuff in production, in my opinion. Like it's good for making like apps that serve one person, so like for personal software and stuff like that. But I think if you want to make something that scales as a business, you probably want to learn how it actually works on the inside. I think there's this project on Twitter that I saw someone like vibe coded a business is making money, and then suddenly he was getting like hacked. Like his like database key was like exposed, people are updating his database, they're like DDoSing him, just like all this stuff, right? All these like basic security vulnerabilities that could be easily be avoided if you just like looked into it or like consulted someone. So like, you know, I think like if you're vibe coding your personal website, there's like very little risk there for anyone taking advantage of anything you're doing. But if you're vibe coding like an app that's like, you know, has payments, you're having like user personal data, stuff like that, I think it can be like very dangerous. But it has been nice to like see people like, because I think with anything you're learning, you want to have something you can show people, right?
Yeah.
So people are able to get to a point where they can show people what they're doing, so they're more inclined to like stick with it and learn. So the best vibe coders I know, like they've been vibe coding, they've been talking to a computer, but then they kind of like sit there and study what's going on, and in a way they're just learning to code normally, but like an accelerated way where they're able to show progress and also kind of see the solution and then learn.
Yeah.
And then the really beautiful thing you can do is that you can ask it what are issues with it and then learn that way. But there's also like a, you know, let Jesus take the wheel type of, you know, way where you just kind of say stuff and then like visually it works and you think like,
Yeah.
oh, this is good. Because that's kind of like the dangerous thing about code is like you don't know it's broken until it is. Like on the surface it could be working, but there might be some issues deep down. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely this disconnect between what's being told as like the future of coding, which is this vibe coding, and the reality of how software is actually built and shipped in the tech industry.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, right? Like it can have consequences, like real life consequences. What the guy's six-figure business went down.
Yeah.
But I think that it's good that it's giving people who might not be from a technical background like the platform to, you know, build prototypes or show others what their work could look like in progress. But at the same time, it's also just a starting point for where the actual, like you said, production work starts.
Yeah, I think it's really good for high fidelity mockups. So I know there are a lot of product designers right now that they'll, instead of just describing a feature or making Figma, they'll just whip up the actual feature in like V0 or Claude or whatever. And obviously it's not going to production, but it can show whoever the higher ups are or, you know, the engineers like, oh, this is kind of what I want. We can test it out with users, you know? They could get like, so you can test more ideas quicker, which I think is really good because as a business, typically before you sink in engineering and design hours, you kind of want to test it out first, so you can test more things out quicker. And so I think like the value is there. This is probably not going to replace like software engineers yet, but it'll rather like augment how you make software. I think it's kind of like a new step in the process.
But like you were saying, people who don't know how to code and they're just telling the model what to do and then taking it at face value, I think it takes like a healthy skepticism to kind of make that work. And if you don't have that, if you just continue, like you said, you build the vulnerabilities in there without realizing it.
Yeah, I mean, like people always want to take the shortcuts, right? That's why like no code tools kind of exist, and I think the best way to do that, like if you want to abstract something to that level where you have to learn it, is it has to be like in a box. So like Shopify is a really good box, I think, because you can't really screw up a Shopify store. You know, they have all these guardrails there for you. And if you want to like really customize it, then you have to kind of get into code and everything. But it's like really hard to screw up a Shopify store because it's like Shopify does one thing. You get a storefront to sell products, right? It's like a box. The issue with vibe coding is that you can create anything, right? So there's a lot of like guardrails for like, oh, these are the best practices we're going to follow. There's a lot of room to kind of screw up.
One thing I've noticed with vibe coding is that yes, it's a lot easier to get the code out there in the first place, but it still hasn't captured what it takes to make great user experiences and good UI. A lot of developers like typically struggle with this as well. In your journey within tech, how have you gone about like balancing this technical excellence with a user-centric design or like good UI, good UX?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a point where there's going to be so much slop software. I feel like most problems have been solved to an extent, right? Or like we have to discover new problems to solve. Like there's so many like workout apps, so there's so many apps that all solve the same problem. And I think the key differentiator there is like the end user experience. I think like most apps are not that novel. They're just like CRUD apps, right? And how do you differentiate between a CRUD app? It's the interface. And so in my head, I kind of value like a design like a lot in whatever software I'm using, right? Because a lot of software is the same. And so the only differentiator I think you have at the end of the day is good design. For me, I didn't really start thinking about design until I had a manager who like really prioritized it. which I think I was really lucky because I had that experience very early on in my career, where there was like a large emphasis on like, oh, what we're doing has to be designed well, like the small details matter a lot. Like I was on a team where our team had a creative director, which I thought was like really crazy because not a lot of like software companies are doing that or software like teams are doing that. So there's like a large emphasis on design early on in my career, and so that's why I think I care about it a bit more.
And you have worked at a lot of like different types of companies as well, right? So what are some like principles of good design that have remained consistent across these things, regardless of the underlying technology?
Yeah, so like I've worked with companies that have designers and companies that don't have designers, and I think the end product definitely suffers, right? And maybe it's not like design, but you need a team that's more like product focused, if that makes sense. So the company I was working with last year, I worked really closely with the designer, and then every detail like was like went over. Like we're dealing like with like internet like software that would be accessed internationally. The designer was from Korea, so there's like small optimizations I have to make to like even like an input box. He's like, oh, numbers in Asia are like handled like this, so we want to account for that. Like numbers in Europe are like this versus North America, like stuff like I would never think about as an engineer. So we're making like optimizations like at that level. And then I've been at a company where like we have no designer at all. It's just engineers making things, right? And so our core tech is like really nice and really well designed, but what the user's interacting with is like pretty awful. Like the UX is really bad, so it's like really hard for people to use, and like people don't really end up using it as much. And so I think like you may have even noticed this at like hackathons and stuff. I think at hackathons is really interesting because oftentimes the projects that win are not really functional, they just look really pretty. Like you could design like a really beautiful back end interface, but for the judge they can't really see that in a way. And so they oftentimes, yeah, if something just looks prettier, it just wins because it looks like it's working even though it's not.
Is there like a real world like example of this aside from hackathons? Like you've noticed something that, or it doesn't even have to be such a disconnect between that, but a new product or service recently that you've been like wowed by the design.
I don't know anything off the top of my head recently that I've seen where I've been wowed by like the design. I see like stuff on Twitter sometimes where the design just looks good, but
Yeah.
nothing like actually used recently. Let me check my phone if I've installed anything. Let me see. Oh, there's like this camera app by this thing called Nuevo Tokyo. It's just like a really unique interface to just it just adds like a black and white filter to your camera.
Right.
I think that's like really weird and uniquely designed that it's like installed recently. Other than that, I don't think I've been using Whisperflow.
What is that?
It's like this speech to text transcription tool.
Okay.
So I think I like how it's kind of displayed on my screen. So essentially, it's just yeah, you hit like the FN key I think on your keyboard, and then it'll start transcribing whatever you're speaking, and I kind of use it to talk to my like LLM on my computer. And so
Oh.
it has like a really beautiful animation at the bottom where like you talk and then there's like a waveform there. And so I think that's like really satisfying to see because it's just kind of like floating on your screen. So I think that's like the most recent thing I've used that I think is really well designed. But I have an example of something I've used where like it looks really well designed, but the back end is awful. So one of my first jobs out of college was at this company that did AI optimized emails. So they kind of like if you've ever gotten an email from The Gap or any brand like that, they decide like what's in the content of those emails. And
Okay.
so my job was to kind of like integrate. We'd have like pilots with these companies and like integrate with their mailing system. I think this was for like Coach or like some other brand, but they had this thing called Cheetah Mail, and no shade, but the UI looked really nice, but it was awfully slow. Like it was really like it was like borderline unusable. So it looked like software that would be really nice to use, but it was like really unbearable. And there's like other email providers that I had to deal with where the UI was like really bad. Like it was like really, really trash, but it worked really like quickly. Like it was really fast, efficient, but the UI just sucked. So I think that's like when I realized like, oh, they should have spent this engineering hours on the back end, not the front end.
But it's sometimes like even like the inane features, like you were saying, like the waveform might not be functional, but it's satisfying, and all of a sudden you prefer that over something else, like that could be doing the same functionality of
Yeah.
like text to speech, but this is a much nicer user experience. Like for me, Spotify was one of like the most memorable major examples when people be talking about Apple Music's like UI, and I'd say, but Spotify is just satisfying to look at. Like that's my preference. That's why I use it. It's the same music, libraries everywhere. Sure, recommendation systems and everything afterwards I understood, but just the experience of looking at that on my phone was what was driving my choice.
Yeah. Oh, an example of software I really want is a really pretty like database viewer. So
Okay.
the default like Postgres database viewer is like really ugly and gross.
Yeah.
And so I've been using something called Beekeeper Studio, which is like it's not that like crazy how it just like more flatter colors, more uniform. Like it just looks visually better. A
Hmm.
software I have to use daily. But yeah, no, I still want like a really nice database viewer that's well designed. But I don't think anyone's really doing that. Yeah.
SQL backend looks like the equivalent of like those yellow notepads that lawyers use. Like that's how far it's come.
Yeah. Oh, an example. I guess if we're talking about notes, if you guys have used Gather, like the note-taking app by Steven on Twitter,
Uh, but
but
Steven on Twitter is crazy, by the way. Like that.
I know who he's talking about, and I've seen like screenshots of the app, and it looks really nice.
oh
But
yeah, I use it's my daily notes app. Let me show you. It's like really pretty. It's like it does the same thing my notes app would do, but it's like there's like a nice blur. Like when I click on it, it's just like really smooth. They've optimized everything, and it's like a really simple idea. You're just taking notes, and obviously they do
Yeah.
other things as well on the app, but I just use it for note taking. And I like it way better than the default notes app on my iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, a simple idea fleshed out and executed well holds a lot more value than a. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I find it interesting that you have a lot of like different perspectives that are unique to you in tech compared to other people. I'm interested in knowing like what aspects of like your identity or background are what gives you this perspective compared to others.
I think maybe just my life experiences. So an interesting thing for me, I guess, being in Toronto is I was born here, but I grew up in the U.S. And so most of my formative years were spent in the Bay Area. And so like I grew up like near like Silicon Valley. I was like attending like hackathons since I was like in middle school. And so like the first hackathon I went to was like at like PayPal's headquarters.
Wow.
And so like and then I got to the really good experience I had there was I got to try the dev kit for the Oculus. So this was like even before I think the Oculus was out. So I got to like try the dev kit, experience VR, and I think like a couple years after that, I think Oculus was out at another hackathon. I got to spend the entire day like making a game for the Oculus, right? So I like this like exposure to like tech really early on. Even like my dad, he was working for AT&T, and so this is like what 2007, like when that first iPhone came out. So the iPhone came out with like AT&T.
Yeah.
So we were like the first families like in our neighborhood to like have an iPhone, right? So I remember using like iOS when there was like the old when YouTube was pre-installed and there's like the old YouTube TV app, like playing like Jelly Car and like all these like random apps and stuff really early on. So I was like fortunate enough to like have like a really early exposure to a lot of this tech. Like I had an iPad really early on. When I moved to California, like all the computers in our public school were like Macs. Like we had like MacBooks. Like it was just like all this like crazy tech. Our computer lab was like really good in my school. So like I grew up around tech, luckily, and then I also like had all these hackathons and stuff I got to go to really early on, which I don't know if I'd had the same experience if I grew up like in Toronto or like Vancouver or like in Canada or anywhere else in the U.S. So I think that definitely has like a big impact on like where my perspective comes from. Yeah.
This is completely unrelated because I have no context in this. But what is Neo Toronto?
Near Toronto is not a place; it's a people.
Okay.
It's like Asgard and like the Thor movies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so there's this guy on Twitter, of course.
Yeah.
His name is Sale Digital on Twitter. And like yeah, there's like storytelling, I guess, happening on Toronto Tech Twitter all of last year.
Uh-huh.
And so then Mr. Digital, I guess, started posting like anime-esque type like tweets and lore where it's like, oh, we're like in Neo Toronto. It's like a homage to Neo Tokyo and Akira, if you've seen that
Okay.
like anime. So that's like how it got coined. So Neo Toronto was then kind of like the word used to describe like kind of like the tech scene movement. It's like, oh, like you live in Toronto, but we're like in Neo Toronto, where like all this fun stuff's happening.
Right.
And I think it's kind of like an interesting thing where it's kind of describing like a virtual world almost, because like a
Uh-huh.
lot of stuff on Twitter is not real, in my opinion. And so like it's interesting to coin it, like have a name for it, to describe like a group of people or like the storytelling and stuff, you know. And then there's also like a symbol associated with it, which I was like really obsessed with, and I think I helped popularize. Not to take credit. But it's
I think you definitely did. Like, the reason I'm aware of that symbol appearing everywhere on Spadina is you.
yeah, yeah, it's like a really fun Easter egg. So it's the old symbol for like metropolitan Toronto.
Okay.
Kind of looks like the a Hydra symbol almost,
Oh my
but
God.
each of like the circles represents like one of the boroughs.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of like a symbol, and so you see it everywhere now.
Mhm.
If you know Optin, he made like those pendants, the metal pendants for it. So I think it's like really interesting because you kind of see that. So now if you see someone with that, you kind of know like, oh, they're like loosely involved in this thing.
This is like a secret society. This is kind of cool, though.
In a good way.
Yeah, no,
In a
sure.
good way.
Yeah, or like a cult.
Right.
Yeah,
As you said, in a good way.
yeah,
Right?
I think it's kind of obvious that Toronto is like a huge part of your identity, right? Like one of the standout projects of yours that has stood out in my mind all this time is Toronto ID. Do you want to maybe
Oh
talk about
yeah,
that a little
yeah. I
bit?
haven't really updated anyone on that project, but yeah. So Toronto ID is a project I'm still working on, even though it's been a long time since I've like provided an update. But essentially, it's like a data layer, for software that's built locally. So it's built on this protocol called the App Protocol, which is a protocol that powers Blue Sky, which is like a Twitter alternative. And so essentially, how software works on that protocol is the data that your software generates is stored under like the user. So each user essentially has, you can describe kind of like a Git repo.
Okay.
And so like when you post something on Blue Sky, it's not like Blue Sky that's hosting the data. It's like your personal repo that's hosting the data, and all the data is like queryable by like any other application. And so the idea is to like make this like data layer for Toronto software on top of that proto, where like if I make an account on one Toronto app and I generate data there, that data is accessible by another application.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. I'm really bad at like pitching this.
So it's like you would have your public health records, right? But for your existence in like a virtual
Well, maybe not
ecosystem?
health records because
No,
that's
I'm
like
just
private
giving.
data.
Yeah,
But
but
what I think would be interesting is if I could cross-reference like your tweets or like whatever your Blue Sky posts are with like writing maybe you've generated on like a Toronto like writing
so your
platform, right?
digital footprint of
Yeah, like a
sorts?
digital footprint or like a digital ID.
Okay.
It's this idea like is this idea I've been really interested in recently. This idea of I don't think software should host data. I think the data itself should be like a separate layer.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with like all the like this amount of like software that's being pushed out right now. I don't think you should be tied to a like everything's a CRUD app, right? And the data is kind of stored in a similar way. So I don't think you should be tied to a specific front end, right? And so like if someone makes like a Toronto Twitter, like like an application that just like a Toronto Twitter, right? Twitter just for Toronto. What if like after a couple months I don't like it? I still want to move all my friends and all my posts with me. I should be able to do that and like move to another platform, but still bring all my like data with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like the core thing. And I'm like, and so Toronto ID kind of solves for that, for like public data, but I'm also interested in doing that for private data. So like in my ideal world, like if I'm using like a fitness app, maybe I like certain parts of it and I use that for a bit. But to move to another fitness app, like how do I do that, right? It'd be cool to have like a single login
Yeah.
where I log into that in another app and it has access to all my data and like I host the data in a way.
Would that also not require like both platforms to have or some sort of like a translation layer that is able to translate the data from say one fitness app might
Yeah.
not map one to everything that you want to move like
Yeah,
migrate?
you would need some sort of translation layer, I guess. If devs want to play it nicely, you could all like adhere to a standard, but you know that's
Right.
always hard. But there's a good article on this which I could send you guys after by like Ink and Switch, where it's looking at like yeah, what does like local first apps look like, or like apps where the users hosting their own data in a way. And so I think that's like the future of software.
From a more power to the people perspective, it sounds like democratizing your like ownership of your like
Yeah, that's like where
data,
my
I guess.
Web3isms come in.
Okay.
That's kind of like the loose idea around it, I guess. It's also kind of like in my head like a Trojan horse
Right.
to get people to use Blue Sky or like stuff like in that protocol ecosystem, because most of the stuff that happens in the Toronto tech scene happens on Twitter, which I like Twitter. It's really fun, but I think there are other people that own it now, and I think it may not always be there forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it'd be good if we had a way to like kind of preserve the interactions, all the data we generate, right? Like there's no really good way for me to preserve the data that I've been creating over the past year, right? Like all the fun memes and videos and like, interactions everyone's having. Like it'd be really nice if you could like preserve that. Because like Twitter got banned in Brazil, right? I think last year, or like they almost got banned, or like users didn't really have access to that, right?
Right.
Then there's like the TikTok ban in the U.S. where people are generating really useful content on TikTok. Like there's also like there's like shit posts, but then there's also like really fun creative things that I've like collected and like mood boarded from. There's useful information on there, and so like if the TikTok ban, I think there's one about to happen or it happened.
It's been pushed.
It's been pushed.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So when that happens, right, I'm losing all that data that I've collected from other people, even though like it's not banned in Canada. And so if it was made on like a protocol like App Proto, you don't have to worry about the platform going down because the data will still be there. And so I think someone's actually making like a TikTok alternative on App Proto, kind of like spurred by like the TikTok ban notion.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think it's like more censorship resistant / you're not reliant on the platform.
Let's switch it up a little bit. I have some more slightly deeper questions for you
Yeah. Okay.
that will tell us more about who you are as a person. Firstly, I'd like to know, when you imagine the legacy of your work a couple of years from now, or maybe even like a couple of decades from now, what would make you feel like your time was well spent now?
I like to produce work I think that's like long lasting. Like for example, like if this Toronto ID thing, if it outlives me, I think for me that's like ideal outcome. Because I'm kind of like into open source stuff, and so I think the beauty of open source is like people kind of like take ownership of the project after you've like published like an initial version. And so for me, an ideal outcome, not just with Toronto ID, but like with other projects I'm maybe working on, is like if it can outlive me, like people get value for it even after I'm gone. I think that's like really impactful. Like if they can use something I built every day, I think would be like a good legacy to have.
Is legacy something that's driving you to produce more things like this?
Maybe not legacy, but it is kind of like I've had like an interesting relationship with like being in Toronto, because for the longest time I kind of wanted to leave like after university, and so I've kind of grown to like the place, and so I'm like, if I'm gonna stay here, I'd like to leave like a good impact in some way, right? So if I can make the city I live in kind of better for some people, I think that'd be useful. So that's kind of like where it comes from. And then for me, I guess it's kind of like the clout doesn't hurt. Like it'd be good to be known for work you're producing. I think like I really care about the work I do, or like software engineering to me is like not necessarily a job, but like rather like a craft, right? So I'd be really good at my craft, and so if I can be like recognized for a craft, I think that'd be good. So that's like always like in the back of my head, I guess. Yeah,
That's pretty cool, especially because like I feel like I've been seeing or reading more about this, I guess, cultural return to desiring greatness or wanting to be recognized for being good at a specific field or in your domain, right?
Yeah, shout out Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Like chalantness?
Yeah, like
Like,
be chalant.
Yeah, care
Yeah.
more, try
Care
hard.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like I don't know, like with the stuff with AI and it's taking everyone's jobs, right? Like I'm not as worried, because I feel like how much like an AI can't replace how much I care about something. Or the sense that like if you care about something, you're more likely to pay attention to the details, right? If something's just a 9 to 5, you're just trying to do the bare minimum, get the task out, and then like I think you can tell like when software is produced with love, I guess. I don't know,
Sure.
like that's kind of the secret ingredient. Like if someone like really cares about something, I think example that maybe I should have brought up earlier is like task management software. So use like Jira or Trello or
Yeah.
anything, right? There's no love there. There's like
Right,
no
yeah.
they're just making like Jira is like everyone's like the bane of their existence. But there's a company called Linear which makes really beautiful, well designed task management software, which it's like it's a joy to use it, even though you're doing such a mundane task. It's because like they have a level of care in what they're designing, right? Like for a lot of designers, like Linear is like a dream place to work because they're doing really good design. It's just a task management company. Like I mean, they have interesting engineering problems, but on a surface level, the idea is not that crazy, right? But it's just like really well designed and executed. Because it comes from like a place of love. Like what they're doing is they're not just making software; they're doing like craft, right? Whereas Trello, they're making a B2B SaaS product, right?
And this like idea of tools like AI replacing entry level jobs, whether it's in software or otherwise, to me it feels like creating a problem for ourselves down the line, because then where do you get people with experience from? Where do you get people who've been through the tough parts of their career to get that perspective and that like decision making prowess that people get when they're like 5, 6, 7 years into their career, right? If they've not been through that entry level pathway, how are Fortune 500 companies going to be promoting people to managerial levels if you don't hire enough analysts to choose from in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's like a thing where I think agency comes in. And so that's like why I'm not worried for me. That's why I'm probably worried for most students right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Rudy is a really good example of a person I'm not worried about.
Okay.
Because like Rudy exercises a lot of agency, right? So like if like honestly, I wish I had more people like Rudy when I was in university because I feel like I was the only person that was more agent. Like I would be doing side projects or like I'd be working on things and like care about like what I'm building, right? And I think when I graduated, it was like a really interesting time because people my year that graduated, they got hit by like layoffs, and then the year after me, everyone was kind of screwed. Like no one was hiring, right? Lucky for me, I kind of like made it out of that because I had a lot of like side projects underneath my belt, a lot of like experience, a lot of stuff like I did aside from school, right? That like gave me like an edge, and like I was able to like work for like smaller companies and like get more work to do, whereas like my friends that didn't really do any side projects was like a much harder time. And so for like Rudy, right, you're taking advantage of like all the AI tools. You're not just sticking to like what UofT is teaching you and just doing like whatever the assignments are. You're building your own projects that you're passionate about and then you care about, right? And so like I think if you're like a company that wants to hire someone, are you gonna hire someone who just has like like a 4.0 and they're just in the classes, or you're gonna hire someone who has like actual projects underneath their belt, right? And so I think like, and I don't think you'd be doing the projects if you didn't care about what you're doing, right, Rudy? Like,
Yeah, I mean, with the projects, it's like the stuff you're doing in class doesn't really like quite cut it,
yeah,
And it makes me feel like I'm not doing all that I can be doing right now.
yeah,
And for me personally, this like idea of leaving stuff on the table, like I know for a fact that like 5, 6 years down the line from now, I'll look back at it in regret. So I might as well make the most of it now.
yeah, yeah.
And I think it lines up with the idea of agency that you mentioned quite well. Like that's something that's quite like foundational to me. Would you say that agency is something that's like a core part of your identity as well?
I think this phrase has been like overused and absolutely like beaten to death, but you can just do things, right?
Right.
I think like yeah, like it's very like you like I think the beauty about like code or software is as long as you have a computer, you can write endless code. You can solve a lot of problems with like you have like endless material to do the thing, right? And so I think that's like kind of magical, and I think like if you don't take advantage of that to just keep making things, right? I think yeah, it is kind of a waste. You're leaving a lot of things on the table.
And the reason you ask if he cares about the projects he's building, is that because you're worried like in like maybe not even a couple of years, maybe like by next fall, the side projects become less of a differentiating factor and more of everybody is doing side projects?
No,
Because
it's just me like I guess like trying to make the point. Like I feel like in my opinion, Rudy does the side projects because he cares about
Right.
software, right? Like because that's like extra time. You're doing your school or job or whatever, and then after 5 p.m. hits, you're doing more of the same thing, and it's really hard to do that if you don't care. I think, like for me, like yeah, like I do a lot of stuff after work, and that's because there's no way I could do that like if I didn't like what I was doing, right?
Right.
And I think that's why I'm not worried about people who are like agentic because like I think they'll be fine. They'll be producing good work, right? Even if like you don't find something after graduation, like you will be doing something, and I'm sure it'll like pay off
because
for
the
anyone.
driving force is consistent.
Yeah,
Like
the
that
driving force
stays.
is consistent. I think like my old manager had told me that like yeah, sharing work every day is like really powerful. Like, if you just do like one post a day, sharing like oh this is what I worked on. Like people will notice like the consistency. Like it will pay off. I think that's really good advice that I should follow. Like it's really hard to do that, but that's like I feel like a lot of people really would vouch for Rudy because you consistently show good work, right? Like I'm pretty sure if like a lot of people in the room would be like, oh yeah, I would hire like Rudy because I've seen his work consistently,
Yeah.
right? And there may be someone else who's also doing work, but they're not sharing it, right?
Regardless of like the bad stuff that I've said about Twitter today, like it's
Yeah.
been a good platform for me to share the work I've been doing and like gather a little bit of audience around the stuff that I produce. I think it's been really helpful for that.
Yeah, and I think like it's interesting also just seeing like not that this is anything you've posted, but in general, I really like seeing stuff that's like silly or just like random or just like totally impractical, but it's like technically cool and impressive that someone spent time doing it, right? There's a lot of like weird graphic stuff and see on Twitter with someone did something like in 3D that just like makes no sense. Like you wouldn't do that in production, but it looks really sick and cool, and it's like really interesting that someone tinkered and like did that for the day, right?
I think it neatly ties back into this idea of software being a craft that you
Yeah.
mentioned before.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just cool to me that it reflects across multiple aspects for you.
Yeah.
And then when we're talking about this idea of like, the driving force staying consistent regardless of how the job market's changing or whatever you're doing is changing, does that like translate to you in some way as well? Like, say you strip away your technical abilities or like your professional accomplishments, like what is the underlying value that's, your staying factor? What is that for you personally?
I think from a very young age, I've always liked making things.
Okay.
Not maybe like in an artistic way, but I was like, I think my dad bought me Legos when I was like 4,
Mhm.
but not like the big Legos, but like the really small ones. And mom's like, why are you like, he's too young for that, right? So I did end up getting the big ones, but I also had the small ones. And I've been like obsessed with Lego since I was like a kid. Like always just like you're just building things, right? So I've always like making things. Like I love like fixing things around the house, like opening up my laptop if something breaks. Like I had an XPS 15 in college that like constantly was breaking. Like I dismantled that thing like 3 times, replaced the motherboard like twice, battery like 3 times. I even like ordered like a custom heatsink off of like Alibaba.
Oh, wow.
Because like people in China like engineered a better heatsink that hopefully would have like fixed the thermal throttle. It kind of did, but not all the way. But like I love just like build like fixing things, making things, right? And so like I think like yeah, if like a I don't know, like electricity went out in the world, right? I'd find something else to do, like maybe woodworking or just like make something, right?
Mhm.
Just like producing something for the world.
And then this is like a segment that we do for like all of our guests, just because we talk a lot about the work you're doing and your projects and the tech space in
Yeah.
general, but now we want to talk about you, right? So
Yeah.
a bit more on theme with like the last question, but we call these rapid fire questions. That's largely a misnomer because you might have to think about them, so feel free to. They're
I'm
not.
gonna answer it so fast.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
we'll see about this. Okay.
Yeah.
Because if not, I'm going to like re-edit this section and I'm going to say, here are some more questions
Okay.
instead of rapid fire questions. Okay. So, what is your go-to comfort meal after, say, a really long work day?
Oh, probably some sort of broth-based dish. So like a ramen or like a pho.
Good shout. Yeah.
Yeah, something warm, right?
Yeah.
Soup. Yeah.
Especially if you live in Toronto, like odds are you're probably better
Yeah.
off with that anyway.
Okay, second question. Would you rather spend a day coding or playing with Lego in the woods, in a cabin in the woods?
Playing as in like I'm like making like airplane noises and stuff,
No,
or
like
That's
building
up to
stuff.
you.
or
You're
like I'm building the
alone.
Lego.
Up to you.
Could I? And where am I coding? Is that in the woods too?
Yeah, cabin in the woods, you have an option. You're either coding all day or you have a.
I'll do coding in the cabin in the woods, just because I have done Lego all day, and it's not good on your fingers, man. It hurts. Like,
No, to be fair, I kind of agree with that.
yeah,
A couple of weeks ago, I spent like 4 or 5 hours trying to build this like Lego F1 car.
yeah.
Dude, it says it's for 9-year-olds,
Yep.
but that
Yeah.
was tough. Like
Dude,
that took me ages.
I've had a couple multi-day builds that I've done. I went ham. So there's this subreddit called r/Lepin. So you can get like fake Legos off of like AliExpress or these other sites, and
Oh.
they're like 90% of the way there to actual Lego. So I think they're really worth it. You could get like a UCS like Ultimate Collector's Edition like set.
90% how? Like the last piece wouldn't fit?
No, it's just like the quality is like almost there.
Okay.
Like I think you would be like I as an adult am like really satisfied with it.
Are there also like 9+ and they take you 5 hours to build? Or-
Yeah, so I bought the Lego Daily Bugle, the
Oh,
knockoff
yeah,
version,
yeah.
right? So I bought that for like it was like $80 and the actual version is like 500 $600, and that took me like 3-4 days with the help of some people, and our fingers were toast after. So I did a bunch of those really multi-day builds after I found out about like this Chinese knockoff version of Lego. It's not fun. Like, it's really like you kind of just like, oh, I wish someone else would build this.
Okay. What is the most random thing you've ever built just for fun? Like this may not be software, could be software, could just be an actual thing.
Most random thing I've built. Yeah, you got me. I actually don't know what's the most random thing I've built. I have like remade a Pomodoro timer like multiple times just for the sake of seeing like how far I've come as like an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that was when I was learning how to do web dev. A Pomodoro timer was one of the first things I made, and it was like really bad. Like there's so many bugs in it. So I've like rewritten like some version of that at least like every 2 years. I rewrite it. And you know, it's like kind of it's a solved problem, but every 2 years I kind of improve it on it better. So I had like the first version, which was like a really shitty JavaScript version of it, lots of bugs. And then the second version I made was kind of like there was a to-do list combined with it that would sync with your Notion. So it's like a very early version of like the Notion API, and so synced with your to-do list on Notion, and then you can see the tasks, and it kind of like reorganizes them. And then like, I think the latest version I built was this summer when like Pomodoro is really popular on Twitter, and so I just made like a really well designed version of it with like sound effects. So I think that's like the cleanest version I have, and then like 2 years from now, I'll probably redo it, and it'll be like an AR thing, you know.
That's really cool though, having that kind of a benchmark like project that you keep going back to, and you're like, look at how much better the same idea has
Yeah,
gotten.
because I think in the second version I solved all like the functional bugs in it,
Right.
and so now the only optimizations I think I can make are like design or like additional features. But I think it's a really good problem because it's complex on like the timing level to some extent, but it's like, yeah, like if you work in a box, you can kind of like really go crazy.
Cool. If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be?
This is one-on-one.
One on one,
Yeah.
the dinner, whoever like made the universe, I guess that's my question. Yeah, I would, yeah, I'd try to get all my answers. Like so, like that could be God, or it could be like if you're in a simulation, whoever made the simulation.
Sure.
I think, yeah, that would be my answer. There's not really anyone. I feel like because of like AI, I just like simulate
Wow.
simulate a conversation with this person. You just ask questions, right?
So you just like take away the soul of the person out of the entire thing. It's
Yeah.
just like,
But if it's someone that's like here, it'd be like Kanye before he went crazy, is who I'd want to meet. I think,
okay.
because I think he's like a really good creative. But so like maybe this is what like 2014 Kanye.
Or you miss the old Kanye?
Yeah, I'm still Kanye. Yeah.
Okay. And what is your guilty pleasure tech gadget that you can't live without? Like, you really should be able to, but you can't live without it.
Oh, probably my AirPods. I feel like they're always in my ears. Whereas like there are like times where I'll lose my AirPods, right? And then sometimes I'm on the verge of just buying new ones because I'm like I feel like I've lost them forever. But then I always end up finding them. But I've been like really close sometimes. Where it's like, oh, I haven't found it all day. Like, you know, I need my hit or like music or something, right?
Right.
But I just feel like it can't be good for me to have like Bluetooth in like near my brain all the time.
Oh, I never thought about it from that perspective. I just thought I was like constantly bombarding my brain with information because if
There's
I'm
also
not,
that, right?
yeah, 'cause
Like
it's not music, then podcast or something.
yeah,
or
there's
the
always
other.
something playing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've wasted a lot of time trying to find like the ideal music for like a task.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you guys have seen Baby Driver, he has like his iPod.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like me like trying to do like everything. It's like, oh, we're doing dishes. Okay, what's the ideal track for this? Or like, you know,
Yeah.
we're about to take out the laundry and putting the laundry in. Like, what's the track for that? You know?
The iPod quick side note, like your personal website, really cool.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
we're
thank
gonna
you.
link that and people
Yeah.
can go check it out when they see it. But
Yeah, my only issue with that is as a concept is really cool. So it's like an iPod interface. Functionally, I think it's an awful website. So the purpose of a personal website is you want to be able to share like blogs, like writings and stuff like that.
yeah.
I think it's really unintuitive to navigate, and I can't have a blog on there because you'd be confined to an iPod size screen.
Yeah.
But I think it was a fun experiment. But I have to rewrite my site to be like a normal website, I think.
Yeah, I feel like if the scroll just links to all those other things, that could also work.
Yeah, yeah. But it's really interesting because I've seen people use it and they have no idea what to do. Like people have forgotten how an iPod works.
Oh, it took me like 1 second to be like, do I scroll? Do I press the button? And then I was like, oh, wait, no. Of course, like instinctively, I was like, yeah, you like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what you do.
What's one app or tool you think is totally underrated?
Underrated. I think knowing how to use the command line, I think is like really underrated. My biggest ick is when I see people use UIs for like version control, unless you're doing like merge editing or something like that. Like if you're like, why do you need to like just type in, you know, git like commit, git push. Like that's like the biggest ick for me. Like if someone doesn't or like know your way around like the file system, like I don't use Finder unless like I have to like copy something, or even then I should use a command. But I like navigate my computer purely through like the command line to like open files. Um,
This might be too esoteric for me. Command line as in your terminal?
yeah, like use like your terminal for things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I feel like that's like I will navigate to my folder and do like cursor dot or code dot to open the folder instead of like clicking through all stuff or like the GUI. But yeah, it's my biggest ick when people are like git committing through the UI. I think
Like through GitHub desktop.
yeah, through GitHub desktop's even worse. Like I think like I get the ick like if you're doing it through like VS Code or Cursor, but if you're doing it through GitHub desktop, I think that's like atrocious. Like
This
yeah.
is such a niche ick to have. This is why people come to listen to this show.
yeah.
Okay, if you could instantly master a skill overnight, what would it be?
Oh, probably being good at design. Yeah. I think I have an appreciation for design, but I'm not a designer. And so that's like something I'm trying to develop. And so if I could just like do that immediately, that'd be great.
If you could go back and give advice to yourself when you were just starting your tech career, what would it be?
It'd probably be to optimize for design, I guess. No, but like actually seriously, like I've thought about this. Like if I knew like how important design would be for like the work we're doing, because I feel like software to some level is like really trivial to make now. Like you should still understand like how systems work and like how to scale things properly. But I think in the next like decade or whatever, like yeah, really well designed things is what's going to be like the differentiator. Even from like a product perspective, like it doesn't have to be like how things look visually, but just from like UX or like how you're trying to solve a problem. So if I could go back in time, I would try to major in like architecture instead of like cognitive science or CS, because I think those skills would be more useful in this world. I think we are in a world right now where we kind of like a magic box where you just type in things, you can create anything, right? Like Midjourney can generate any image you can come up with. But the thing is, you still have to come up with that image. So a lot of images are like trash. Like I'm not that good at using Midjourney because I don't have that thing developed yet where I know what I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
But if you kind of have that skill of like, oh, this is the taste I have and this is what I want to see, you can really use these tools to create anything. But these tools aren't going to do like the creative part of it for you. Does that make sense?
Right. It's just translating it.
Yeah. So definitely study architecture, I think.
Yeah. One of my friends is like studying architecture, and he's one of my favorite people to talk to about art, cultural things, whether
Yeah.
it's movies, games, design, and his opinion or perspective on things is always super cool. Quick shout out, Bose, if he's listening. I doubt he is.
Like
but-
Virgil studied architecture not to create buildings, but he just like knew like, oh, I want to be a designer, and so this is gonna translate well.
Yeah. So if your life was a movie, what would it be titled?
Damn. Everything, everywhere, all at once. I just have so much stuff going on all at once. I'm all over the place. Yeah.
It's a good
Nice.
answer.
Yeah.
Last question. This is probably the most important rapid fire question,
Okay.
right? Ready?
Yeah.
Cats or dogs?
Oh, guys, I knew this one was coming. I listened to pod before.
Hey, we have a listener, so
yeah.
you're the one.
Yeah. For me, it's like I would say both. That's probably not a satisfying answer, but I feel like each is good for like a specific situation. So I grew up with a cat and I've had a dog before as well. And I think cats are good if you don't have the time for a dog. But a dog will love you more, but they're also way, way more work. Like a dog is like having an actual baby that never grows up
Yeah.
because you have to like really give it attention, feed it,
Yeah.
everything. A cat's like way more independent unless you win like the cat lottery and have a cat that really loves you and like wants to sit on your lap. But a cat's like, yeah, they're independent. You can leave them home alone for like 4 days as long as you have like auto feeder and like water for them.
Okay.
But a dog, if you leave alone for the day, the dog's gone. Yeah.
You see what I was saying about the rapid fire questions, though?
Yeah.
You see
I
what
feel
I
like
mean?
I went pretty rapid. I don't know.
I mean, you were rapid in giving like the initial answer.
Yeah.
But
But I
don't-
would expand. I expand on them. Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's always good.
yeah.
Drop down menus.
So I guess with that, we can wrap up this episode. Thank you for coming to the Not a Minimum Viable podcast.
Yeah.
Kelindi.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Before we go, do you have any last words you'd like to say?
Yeah, one piece of advice to our listeners,
Just keep doing things and then maybe also stop doing things sometimes. Like I think people do too much as well. So just have like a good balance of like doing things and not doing things. I don't know if that makes any sense,
It's
but
profound.
yeah, I feel like we're in a really hyper productive ecosystem right now, and so sometimes it's okay to not do things.
Cool. So do things and don't do things.
Yeah, do things and
Yeah.
don't do things. Yeah.
That Venn diagram is kind of blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
Just the things in the intersection.
You can just stop doing things, I think, is an amazing phrase. I hope takes off.
Oh yeah. And then maybe a year from now you're on a podcast and that would have been beaten to death as well. So
Yeah. At that point, we'll go back to you can just do things.
I mean,
But
It's a
it's
never-ending
a natural
cycle.
cycle. Yeah.
yeah, I think like, sorry, one last note. I think people are being sometimes too agentic. I think sometimes there are things you don't have to do that people are doing.
Having too much agency is actually a
Yeah,
bad
it's too
thing.
much
Yeah.
initiative. Calm
Too
down.
much
Calm
free will. Believe
Never
sometimes
ending.
in like divine predestination. I think bring divine predestination back. I believe that's the word. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
It's all deterministic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you came for the tech, you stayed for the philosophy. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been Not an MVP.
See ya.
Bye.